Hey everybody, I goofed. So I am having to re-record the opening to the webinar on funding the business of your dreams because I forgot to hit record. So I'm redoing the intro here and the first few slides so that you'll have that. And then we'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming. Money, 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 money. Welcome, everybody. You're here because you want to learn about the best options that you can use to help you get the money that you need to start, to grow, or to scale the business of your dreams. What I can tell you is that this money, it's not just going to fall from the sky like you see in the picture here. And your chances of winning the lottery, well, they're probably not too good. But your being here today does make you a winner because you're going to leave today's session with a winning strategy for how and where you can get the funding that you need. That's going to be the right solution for you to start, build, and grow that business of your dreams. I'm Stacy Riska, and I'm joined by my husband, Dave Riska. We're both with Next Level Franchise Group. We help people make their dream of business ownership a reality. And that usually entails needing some kind of funding. That's why we're thrilled to have our guest speaker today, Lara Forchuk from Guidant. She is going to go really deep on two funding solutions that could be really great options for you. All right, everybody, this is a re-recording because I goofed up and therefore I don't have the poll to present. But when we had this live event, it seemed that most people were interested in starting a business from scratch. They were looking for about $100,000 in funding. And therefore, they were here to kind of learn more about how they could do that. What you guys shared in the poll, know that Dave and I have been down the same paths. We've actually been down all of them. We've had the 9-to-5 job. We started a business from scratch. We actually grew it so quickly and successfully that we ended up buying 2 more businesses along the way, and then we ended up selling it. Stacy had her midlife crisis and said, well, what's my next? Well, we decided to invest in a franchise. We ended up in a Hawaiian theme coffee smoothie business, which we still run today, 16 years later. Now, what we can tell you is that ever since day one, we've been the #1 franchisee in that system. And that's why we're so passionate about helping you, the aspiring business owner, learn about and explore franchise business ownership. Now, why franchise business ownership? None of you said that you're interested in franchising. Well, we know that if you're going to go into business, you want to be successful. And honestly, franchising has the stats to back it up. You see, here's the reality. Many of you say you want to start a business from scratch. But the stats say that 9 out of 10 will be out of business by year 5. Whereas with franchising, 9 out of 10 will still be in business by year 5. So which one has the biggest chance of success? Yes, franchising. And that's why we're so passionate about helping you learn and explore the options that are available to you. Many of the people we talk to, especially those who initially are thinking, I just want to start my own business from scratch because I already know everything about franchises. Well, we're going to test your knowledge of that today. Dave and I have a quiz for you. Let's get started. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming, the recording of the Funding the Business of Your Dreams webinar. Absolutely. Thank you. You're right. So wouldn't you rather know that you're going to be in business by year 5? You don't have so much success chances of doing that when you start from scratch. So when we talk to candidates about franchises, they'll be like, oh, I already know about franchises. Well, let's see how much you know. We have a quiz for you. On your screen, question number 1, pop quiz time. How many franchise concepts do you think there are? If you were to look at franchises, how many do you think that there are that you could possibly look at? And some of you, I know I've spoken to, you'll already know the answer. So no cheating, no sharing answers, but I know some of you will get this right. I'm gonna close it down. 3, 2, 1. Okay, kind of ran the gamut between 1,500 and 4,000. The correct answer is 4,000. There are more than 4,000 franchises, right? It's more than just McDonald's and Subway. Next question. Now that you know there's 4,000 franchises, how many different industries do you think that represents? Maybe fast food, maybe retail, but how many different industries do you think that franchising represents? Dun, 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 dun. Okay, I'm gonna close it down. 3, 2, 1. All over the board as well. The correct answer, only one of you got it, is 90. There are 90 different franchise industries. It's a lot more than French fries and fast food. Pretty much any business concept that you can think of, there's a franchise for it. Everything from pets to senior care to home services. So when you're driving down the street and you look at that business on the side of the road, chances are there's a franchise concept representing it. One more question. Now that you know there's 4,000 franchises representing 90 industries, how many individual franchise units do you think are open today? Answers are coming in. I'm going to close it down. 3, 2, 1. All over the board as well. All right. The correct answer, 900,000. There are over 900,000 franchises open today. Now think about how many people those franchises employ. You see, franchising is a big part of the US economy. And therefore, that's why it's such an important part of our economy that think about that versus you being on your own running a business. So I hope you guys learned a lot from that quiz, but we're not done yet. Dave has a quiz for you as well.
All right, everyone. First off, I want to start off by thanking everybody for joining us today to learn a little bit about the money. Regardless if you're looking at starting a business from scratch, acquiring a business, or looking at a franchise. We're going to play a game right now called Franchise Myth or Fact. And what I want you to do is I want you to put in the chat whether you believe this statement is a myth or a fact. So I'm going to read it off and then just put your answer in the chat. Myth or fact, you need a lot of money to buy a franchise. So do you think that is a myth or a fact? Let's get some answers, put it in the chat. If you don't, I'm going to tell you the answer anyway, but still. All right, we got fact, we got myth, subjective question. Okay, fine. All right, awesome. Stacy, go ahead. What's the answer?
I'm going the wrong way.
You are going the wrong way. That is a myth subjectively. So the reality of it is that you don't need a lot of money necessarily to acquire a franchise. You know, first off, we're here today to learn about one of the options, which is funding. And the great thing about a franchise, because it is a proven business system, is that finding funding is a lot easier than if you go out and start a business on your own. You've already got a proven system, typically already have a business plan, and the banks are and lending institutions are a lot more likely to want to take your ideas and lend money on those. So that's number one. Number two is there's a lot of different types of franchises. As Stacy said, there's 4,000 franchises, 90 different industries, and there are a lot of home-based franchises today and emerging brand types of franchises today, in which the investment in those is much lower than the traditional brick and mortar franchise that many of us think about. So the answer is subjective, but the reality of it is that you don't necessarily need a lot of money to acquire a franchise. So myth or fact, put this in the chat. You can use your 401k as a funding source when buying a franchise. So in the chat, put in there if you think that's a myth or a fact. Let's see what we get here. You got myth, fact, fact. Anybody else? All right, Stacy, go ahead. Well, that is a fact, and it's behind my screen, so I can't see it, but that is a fact, and that's why we're here. We're here to learn about some funding options that are available, and Lara is going to share with you some great opportunities that do exist today that revolve around 401k funding. And finally, we've got one more myth or fact. If you had the funding available, you could buy a franchise tomorrow if you wanted, right? Myth or fact. So if you had all the funding you needed, you could just walk out and buy a franchise tomorrow if you wanted. Let's get some answers to that. Myth or fact? I got some facts and myths. All right, Stacy. Again, this is another one of these subjective questions. This is a myth. The reality of it is that franchises are awarded. You cannot just walk out and buy a franchise. They are basically going to want to interview you, make sure you're a good fit. And not only that, you may be looking at a specific territory that may or may not be available. Therefore, you have to be approved to acquire a franchise. You can't just go out and hand them a check and say, I'm in. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Stacy and just going to continue on about the money.
Great. Yeah, well, we're here to learn about the money. So what's next is I'm going to have Lara come on and share with us more information of what you really came to learn about, which is funding. But before we do that, I want to put up our contact information on the screen if you want to grab a screen share or print this out, whatever you want to do. Dave and I are here to help you learn and explore all the options available with franchises. And it's not that we're going to go through all 4,000 with you. What we do is help you get clarity on two things. One is your why. Why are you even looking at business ownership? And then taking your transferable skills, interests, resources, and passion and matching you to franchise concepts that would be a great fit. So if you would like Dave and I to do our expert franchise matchmaking, you can grab a day and time on our calendar by going to explore.nextlevelfranchisegroup.com, and we'll be happy to help you. And of course, we work with Lara to help our candidates when they need funding as well. So Lara, it's all you. Go ahead and share. And unmute, please.
Okay, can everybody hear me all right?
You're good.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate the invitation to be here today. It's a pleasure. Stacy and Dave, thank you for that. And Next Level Franchise Group. Excited to talk to everybody and find out how we can get them pointed in the right direction to get in the journey of their dreams of independence and not necessarily being tied down to corporations and getting the paycheck that way every day. So I'm with Guidant Financial, as Stacy said. And at Guidant, we have a dedicated team for franchising. We actually also have a dedicated team for non-franchising, but I am with the franchise group, and our director of sales is Ralph Nielsen, and we have few other people that have been in the industry for many, many years. So that is a part of our team. So when we first talk about what sort of funding options are available, everybody thinks about loans. And when we think about loans, we really don't break them down into what kind of loan are we talking about. So today there's two main methods of funding that I really want to focus on. There is SBA loans, the Rollover for Business startups, which isn't truly a loan, but it is a way of funding. And then there are several other options for funding that we're not going to talk about today, but I will briefly mention them. They include unsecured loans, portfolio loans. Those are also available. So let's start with the Rollover for Business startups. If I was talking to you folks one-on-one, actually, I can actually ask you right now, how many people have ever heard of ROBS? Is that something that the Rollover for Business startups? Stacy, can you see this in the chat at all? If anybody,
yeah, put in the chat if you know what ROBS is or you've heard of this program before.
So when I talk to people on a daily basis, I would say 99.9% of the people have never heard of this concept. And what it is, it actually allows you to invest up to 100% of your existing retirement assets into a small business without without incurring the early penalty that one would normally think of when you're talking about cashing in a retirement plan, because you're not cashing it in. So it's one of these counterintuitive types of funding methods that we really do not hear mainstream. And on a daily basis, I tell people why we haven't heard about it mainstream. Well, there are big boys out there, Wall Street, Microsoft, Google, and to be honest, like even financial advisors have something to gain by you keeping all of your money in the market. So rather than investing in yourself, that's what they're a little bit of a biased opinion. They want your money there. And I don't know about you, my whole life, I found it counterintuitive that I would be told, just put this money here. Don't look at it. Don't touch it. Leave it here. But Stacy, I don't know about you, but I think I have my future best in mind over anybody else. So that is what the Rollover for Business allows you to do. It allows you to control your future success. How does it work? Well, there's a few different ways and strategies that we can actually use ROBS. A person can use it actually when they're short on their equity injection that's required. They can use it if they're short on their post-closing liquidity. I'll get into some of these phrases as we get going a little further. If a person needs this money quickly, they'll often go this way, because there are other methods of funding that do take months and months to fund. We can get a ROBS done 4 to 6 weeks. The other reason that a lot of people go this direction is because they don't want debt. One of the biggest challenges to getting in the black is that looming overhead monthly payment that a company has before they can actually earn and get profits. So this funding option can allow a company to get making money, putting it in your pocket quicker. So what kind of plans can be used? 401ks, you're very, if you were at a working for a company, your 401k, very traditional. 401k can be used. A traditional IRA can be used. 403bs, 457s, TSP, so the thrift savings plans. There is an array of retirement plans that can be used. I've ostracized the ones that are typically used without caveats, because there are some hoops to be jumped through with some of the other ones. But the reality is most people have 401ks. Most people have the traditional IRAs. And there are some of the specific ones that are dedicated to the type of employers like teachers or firemen and policemen. those ones are
Clara?
eligible.
So stopping you there, because many of the candidates that we work with, they're veterans. And so there's
Yes.
a question in the chat right now. Does ROBS include military retirement benefit?
Well, that's a great question. So it depends on, and by the way, please feel free to interject with questions at any point in time. I'd be happy into what we're talking about at the moment. So thank you. So, you know, if a person is earning like a disability check, that sort of thing, that unfortunately is not quantifiable or qualifiable. But the TSP, the Thrift Savings Plan that many veterans have put into throughout their career in the military, that is eligible. And that's what that TSP stands for, the Thrift Savings Plan. And that one is where we see most of where our veterans have put their retirement savings. I hope that answers that question for the person that asked.
Mhm.
So one of the big caveats is that if you're in a TSP in the military, if you're in a 401k from a corporation, or a teacher or a fireman or whatever it is that happens to have a 401k or retirement plan in place, it has to be a past employer. So Dave, let's say that you worked for company A for 17 years, and then you left to go to company B because they had a better offer for you. And at that time, you rolled company A's 401k into company B's 401k that they offered. So if I were to say to you, Dave, do you have any retirement savings? And you say, yeah. I'd say, okay, are they with a current employer? You'd say, yep. And then I would say, Dave, are they all with a current employer? Or did you happen to roll anything in from a past employer? And you'd say, yeah, you know what? The lion's share of my retirement was from that employer I was with for 17 years. So those are the ones we're looking for, past employers, or a traditional IRA. No strings attached, a traditional IRA all day long. Now, people ask me about IRAs quite frequently. The one thing we have to remember is there's also Roth IRAs. So one of the rules for this is it has to be pre-tax dollars. So a Roth, by definition, is post-tax dollars. So we need it to be pre-tax dollars, folks. So that is pretty much a rundown of what kind of accounts can be used. So yes.
What about a regular pension? There's a question in the chat about that.
That's a great question. And in terms of a regular pension, what I would suggest an individual to do would be to go to the custodian of their plan. And the easiest way to do it, Stacy, is to say this, because nobody knows what a ROBS is. But if you went to the custodian of your plan and said, hey, I would like to roll it over into a traditional IRA, can I do that? That will get you your answer. Every pension is different. So it's not one that I can give a blanket yes or no answer to. But the custodian of your plan can do that. And simplify it. May I roll my pension into a traditional IRA? So that will give you your answer. And Stacy, I appreciate you jumping in like that because I'm very happy to answer those questions.
Thank you.
All right, so how does a ROBS work? How do we set it up? Well, Guidant creates a C corporation for you. Underneath that C corporation, we create a brand new 401k. And then from there, we take any eligible funds and we roll them into this new 401k that we created. Now, that new 401k is then filled with cash. And you know as well as I do that retirement savings plans don't usually have cash in them. They have paper. They have stocks. They have bonds, some sort of an investment in them. So Guidant helps return that 401k to its natural state of being filled with an investment. And we do an exchange. We facilitate an exchange. And you can see with the dollar signs at the top there, of cash into the corporation, and the corporation gives the 401k stock in your new business. So the 401k is returned to its natural state, filled with investments, and your corporation is injected with the cash required to operate. Make sense, everybody? Clear as mud, right? So that is really the summary of ROBS. There are a couple of other caveats to it. You do need to be willing to put in 10 to 20 hours a week, whether that's back office, whether that's marketing, whether it's accounting. Usually what I ask people when they say, no, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to put in 7 hours a week. I'll say, okay, how much time do you spend on social media in a week or watching television? Do you think you could scrape up another 3 or 4 or 5 hours? I've yet to have anybody say, no, I can't do that, because, you know, it is your future you're investing in. So that is one of the other caveats to it. You need to be putting some time into it. It has to be a business that provides a product or a service, and it needs to be from an eligible account. All right. Now, the other way that the ROBS can work is as the cash injection required for an SBA loan. Now, Stacy hit on this perfectly when she was talking about the different requirements of the SBA. And I'm not going to get into that quite yet, but this is where, if the SBA is requiring 20 or 30% down, if it's a $200,000 business, 20% of that is $40,000 down. And then they still want you to have 10% post-lending liquidity, which means they want you to have some cash in your bank account yet. So this can actually act as all of that in that instance. It can act and fulfill the obligations and requirements of the SBA loan. So that puts us right into a great segue into the next conversation on the SBA loans. What are the criteria for it? What does it look like? Well, we talk about the 5 C's of SBA lending. We talk about capital, credit, capacity, character, and collateral. So we'll start with collateral. A lot of our franchises that we look at are, well under 350, and Guidant actually deals with a bank that if the loan itself is under 350, you do not need to collateralize your home on the loan, which is a huge benefit to people, for one, if they're renting, and for two, if they just don't have enough equity in their home, because that does happen as well. So if it's a huge loan, the bank may look for collateral, but like I said, we are working with a bank that does not require collateral. And collateral usually means equity in the home that you have, or in a home. Character. So have you had a bankruptcy, foreclosure, short sale? Do you have a judgment against you? This is one of those funny things. If I said to Dave, do you have an impending divorce? You better say no, Dave.
I'll say no.
Good. So that's perfect. But had you said yes, I would say, oh, well, the SBA can't actually give you a loan until that is finalized, that judgment is finalized. Felonies can be a bit of an issue. And the big thing is, I tell everybody, full disclosure. That's what you need to do. So for instance, if you had a bankruptcy in 1986, just tell us about it. The SBA and a lender are likely not going to worry about it. What they worry about is when you don't tell us about it. I had a client the other day that just didn't even think to say anything because it was so long ago. They got all the way through the whole process and they were just about to fund. And wait a second, you had a bankruptcy you didn't tell us about. So had they just said, yes, we had a bankruptcy, that would have been fine. So full disclosure, people, all the time. There's no shame in it. Everybody has a past. Make sure you just tell the whole story, and we're all here to work together to get you to the right end. So capacity. Capacity is your ability to service your monthly household debt while you are waiting for your franchise to get up and running and producing money. So rather than putting the stress on the bank, on your business, you actually have some source of income coming in from elsewhere. So let's say Stacy and Dave were together, and Stacy's going to quit her job outright and get into a franchise. Dave says, well, I'm going to stay at my job And I asked Dave, so what is your annual salary that you're bringing in, like your household salary? Well, it's just Dave's now that we're counting, because we're not counting on Stacy's at this point. So Dave says, well, this is what I'm making. And I'll say, okay, guys, well, what does your monthly household expense look like? You know, your mortgage, your car payments, any credit card debt, all those sorts of things. Now that is what capacity is. Can Dave pay that monthly household bill, the expenses, while Stacy's waiting for her business to get off the ground? So, and that can be more challenging with a single person, but a lot of times we're hearing about, and I'm sure Dave, Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong, are you hearing lots about semi-absentee businesses?
Yeah.
This is where a semi-absentee business is awesome. What that does is it allows an individual to actually stay at their current job, fulfilling the requirement of capacity to pay their bills, but also getting that business off the ground. And that it's a perfect relationship. So these semi-absentee franchises are awesome. And I'm sure Stacy, at some point in time, you can talk and address more of that. So guys, credit is the be all end all, except for if you're doing a ROBS. If you can fully fund a business with a ROBS, your credit score does not matter. But with everything else, it does. So what are we looking for? 690, 690 or greater. It's just one of those things that makes getting a lender extremely challenging if the credit score is lower than that. So write that number down, 690. That's what we need. At Guidant, if you came to me and you had some questions for me and we learned that your credit score is 520, I would be able to make a mutual introduction for you with somebody a respectable person in the industry that can actually help you repair your credit. So there are ways to get there faster than doing it on your own. So we always try to get people pointed in the right direction, even if you're not there right yet. So finally, there's capital. Now that's how much money down. So most, with an SBA 7A loan, it requires 20 to 30% down. If you were to go to their website right now, it would say greater than 10%. Everything on the website is minimums. The reality is, what are they asking for today? Today is 20 to 30% down. Why is there variance? It can be variable because of the candidate. It can be variable because of the type of franchise or business. So if it's a franchise that is emerging to the SBA means between 35 and 50 concepts on the ground. Isn't that a hard number? 35 and 50. That's a very big span, but that's what it is. So I usually tell people 50, I'd rather under promise and over deliver. So if they have 40 concepts on the ground, you may need to put 30% down. But there are so many tried and true concepts out there as well, where you can actually just put 20% down and still have that 10% post-lending liquidity that I mentioned earlier. What is that? That 10% post-lending liquidity is extra cash available to you just in case things go sideways. The SBA wants to make sure you're set up for success. So that's what that is. Now, again, the capital, the cash down payment, the equity, the liquidity can all come from a rollover if you have that. It can also come from cash on hand. So those are the two ways you can go about it. I will briefly mention there is another way of funding that is an SBA loan, and Stacy alluded to types of franchises that are either brick and mortar or not. And there is a concept of funding called the Express loan, the SBA Express or the SBA Working Capital loan that requires less down payment, but is only available to non-brick and mortar type businesses. And it goes up to 150,000. So just want to throw that out there. All the other criteria are the same, but it requires less down. So at Guidant, we have a streamlined process in terms of how we get you through the SBA process. It's tried and proven. So that is one of the things that, you know, it can be difficult as an individual on their own. And speaking of that, so what are some of the pitfalls when we talk about SBA lending? Like if you came to me, Dave, and said, listen, I'm going to do this all on my own. I don't need your help. And you'd say, well, look, what harm would it do if I just did this all on my own? Well, sometimes what happens is a client will have one lender, they will go to them, they will be convinced that they can get the loan through them. But that's truly putting all their eggs in one basket. And they have done an enormous amount of work to get that application submitted. And then they find out they get rubber stamped with a big red X on it. So you put your eggs in one basket and have nothing to show for it after several weeks of working on it. Another pitfall is shopping. So it's actually the opposite. It's like you can't win for losing. So shopping means going to several different creditors, trying to get somebody that'll take you on. Well, not only does that gives you credit pulls that'll affect your credit score, the banks don't like it when people do that. They know that you're not serious or that you're shopping, you're not being loyal. So that is one of the pitfalls. Another one is when you're looking at a multi-unit project, one of the things, and this is also counterintuitive. Say, Stacy, you came to me and you had $200,000 in your rollover in your 401k, and that's what you wanted to do. You wanted to do a 401k rollover. But I got to talking to Stacy a little bit more, and she said, well, I want to do a multi-unit project. I want to do, I'm going to buy a package. So in that event, I would say, Stacy, you know what? Let's do the SBA loan first, because SBA loans are not that easy to get. They are a lot of work, and it's easier to get an SBA loan on your first business rather than subsequent businesses. So that is definitely something that an experienced funding agent can help you with and point you in that direction. Some banks actually won't even touch deals under $500,000. They also have certain types of businesses they won't touch either, food and fitness, such like that. And you're definitely not going to find that on their, on their website when you go looking for it. The second last one is, are you leaving your job? We talked about that incapacity. Some people just think that, oh, I can leave my job and do this. Well, the SBA does not want you to do that. So to help you, we make sure we consult you, and we make sure that you know what your obligation is, and to make sure you go down the right path. The other thing I tell people, who likes to do their taxes? Not me. And honestly, doing an SBA loan is like doing your taxes 4 times over. It's not a fun process, and we like to tell you that up front, and we keep you on task and keep you moving in the right direction. That last slide I had showed about streamlining the process, that's where that comes in. And I like to make sure people know that. All right, so what about ROBS? What are some of the pitfalls with it? Well, earlier is better. Somebody asked about using a TSP, or if they're in the military, how would that work? TSPs traditionally actually take a long time to get rolled. You came to me, Dave, and said, this is my retirement fund that I have. I'd say, Dave, call your custodian now. Let's find out, how long is that going to take? Rather than you just assuming that it's going to be the same as a traditional IRA. So we make sure that you know the nuances of your specific kind of fund that you have, which goes right into the next question, asking in your custodian how long that takes. Now, the other thing is leaving your job. And again, these are almost incompatible behaviors. So SBA wants you to stay at your job. ROBS wants you to leave your job if all your funds are with a prior employer. So things to think about. Another item is the whole process of actually setting up a ROBS is fairly complex. And you can't just roll that money into any traditional account. If you do, you could actually end up paying taxes on your retirement plan, which is exactly what we're avoiding doing. So the other final item is not following the guidelines of how to structure a rollover for business startups to a T. I don't know about you, but when I see a letter in the mail from the IRS, I don't care if it's a check in there. My stomach flips, my chest tightens. I want to know that when I get a letter from the IRS, I have been compliant. One of the things that Guidant does offer is 100% audit protection as well. So that is something that you can put your head on your pillow at night, feel confident you've done the right things. I guess lastly here is not being aware of all your funding options, that whether it be ROBS, SBA, term loans, it can be a pitfall to somebody on their own that doesn't realize all the options available to them. Why wouldn't you just pay cash? Well, cash is king. Let's say if you said to me, well, I want to put $40,000 down or $60,000 down on my $200,000 business. I have that cash on hand. Why wouldn't I do that? Well, Stacy, what if the roof on your house goes? How are you going to pay for that? You've already paid taxes on that money. If you put all your cash on hand into a down payment, you may not be able to pay some of the other items or inject some extra cash when the business needs it. So things to think about in that respect. Finally, in terms of franchises, something to think about, there are actually franchises that are already in existence that some people want to sell. So I know at the beginning of this talk, people said, I want to start something from scratch. This is a really neat option. And what it is, let's say Dave said, well, you know what, we're going to sell our Hawaiian smoothie franchise. It is an established existing business. The exciting thing about that is an individual can quit their day job and go right into that, because Dave and Stacy have done such a tremendous job on making sure that they're showing a profit and earning money, that the SBA sees that as a source of income and views that, well, yeah, Dave, you can quit your job. So Guidant actually offers some services to that end where you can do valuations and business appraisals on already existing franchises. All right, I appreciate everybody's time, and I would love to answer some questions if anybody has some.
Lara, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this great information. There is a question in the chat about credit scores. You kind of alluded to this magic number of 690. And I think, as we all know, different credit agencies report differently. So what is that number based on?
That's a great question. You know what? In the end, they pull 3 different types of credit. Because that varies. Like if you look at Equifax, they vary across the board. So they generally will pull 3 different credit scores, and it can be a mixture of all 3. So let's say if one of the scores is 670 and the other is 710, it can work out. And that's why they look at more than one score, Stacy, because they recognize there's variance in that industry.
Great. Thank you. Where were you 16 years ago when Dave and I bought our business? We kind of just figured it out. We were doing research on our own. We didn't work with someone like Lara, who has a resource, all these resources. We didn't know there was a Rob's. We kind of did, you do the typical go to the bank, you do your credit cards, you take money out of your house. She didn't talk about any of these today. Those are not necessarily your best funding solutions. So I really want to encourage you to reach out to Lara, irregardless of where you are in your journey, because it's so much better to know the information up front. Whether you're starting, growing, or scaling your business, isn't it important to know that you have that funding in place, that you know where and how you can get the money? You don't want to be in a 911 situation and have to deal with that. What other questions do you have? You can put them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll unmute you. I think you knocked it out of the park, Lara.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with everybody, and at any time, I'd be thrilled to answer any questions. And, as much as Stacy said, there are certain methods that we don't recommend or that are better than others. We definitely will talk about HELOCs, home equity lines of credit. There are things like that that are out there that we can maybe use in tandem with another method.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming on today. There's lots of great feedback for you, Lara, in the chat. So everybody found this very informative. So whether you're looking for funding or you want to explore franchise business ownership, Dave, I, and Lara are always here to support you. Thanks for coming on today. Make it a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.